Spacehog was frequently labeled as a glam-inspired band, and they would emerge out of nowhere during the mid-90s. Most people know them for really just one song, In the Meantime. The song was prominently featured in the trailer and the soundtrack for Guardians of the Galaxy 3, and on video games like Guitar Hero 5 and Rock Band 3. Spacehog ended up touring with some of the biggest rock bands on the planet, including Oasis, REM, Pearl Jam, and Red Hot Chili Peppers, in addition to releasing 4 studio records. Despite all the members being from the UK, they actually never met there, and they didn't have much success back home. Instead, they became bigger in America, and it resulted in some of their home country writing them off as an American band. In today's video, let's talk about Spacehog and their iconic track, In the Meantime. Before we get started, be sure to hit the bell notification icon and put all notifications on. I hear from a lot of my subscribers that they don't even get notifications when I post my videos. I would greatly appreciate if you guys did that. The history of the group begins with the Langdon brothers, Antony and Royston. Antony is older, and both of them were raised in Leeds in the UK. The brothers came from a musical family performing in church choir when they were younger. Their early musical influences included the likes of the Beatles, David Bowie, Queen, and of course Led Zeppelin. Royston always had dreams of living a very glamorous life, something he chalked up to his mother, who frequently bought Vogue magazine. He'd open the magazines and see well-dressed models getting out of expensive cars, and he seemed to be more into those kinds of people, and they seemed to be more like the types of people who favored cocktails over beer at the local pub. Couple this with growing up in the 70s, and Royston reveled in the atmosphere of gender bending and dressing androgynously, even admitting to sometimes wearing his mom's makeup. He apparently even showed up on an 80s TV show that was a Battle of the Bands format when he played in a group called the Raspberries. Antony, meanwhile, was a restless spirit. He soon left Leeds, and he found himself living in Switzerland, Hong Kong, and London before he followed a girlfriend to New York City by the early 90s. But that girlfriend dumped him by 1994. Royston, feeling bad for his brother, opted to pay him a visit in New York to cheer him up. Royston at the time was playing in a band who was on the verge of getting a record label deal with a company called Rhythm King. But he wasn't happy in the band, and he also hated the British music press. He told the Toronto Star, "I was dreading all the small-minded students with angst and acne kind of writing about us. You can be one of the New Musical Express bands, and then 6 months later, they're slagging you off and printing funny pictures of you." A few days prior to Royston arriving in New York to visit his brother, Antony met a drummer named Johnny Cragg at an espresso bar where the drummer worked as a barista and, believe it or not, a rat killer. Cragg at the time was living with a friend, sleeping on his floor, and only came to America after being bored back home in England, wanting to leave behind his hard partying days and his drug lifestyle. He'd also admit he crossed the ocean in search of rock and roll, something he claimed he couldn't find back home. The drummer was offered a job to clean a basement of an espresso bar, only to later learn it was rat-infested. It turned out the espresso bar shared a basement with a pharmacy, and the rats were nesting in old boxes of medicine. But it actually made his job easier as the rats were high on downers. While working at the espresso bar in March of 1994, Cragg overheard someone talking in a Leeds accent, and that person turned out to be Antony. The two struck up a conversation and started jamming together, and soon enough Royston showed up. The seeds of Spacehog would finally be born. Royston ended up fronting the group and played bass while his brother played guitar. Royston's initial plans were just to visit his brother for a week or so, but of course those changed. In fact, he'd already written a number of songs for his old band and was enthralled by New York City, so the timing just felt perfect. He was playing in a group called the Zeros at the time. He recalled to Song Facts, "I think New York's a great place for people that are curious. New York will always be a great place to have a social life, and when I say social life, I don't just mean NYU students going out to the East Village on a Friday or Saturday night. I'm talking about really meaningful connections with other humans from all over the planet." Royston was also bored of his band, The Zeros, and just the rock scene in general in the UK, telling Magna Magazine, "I was getting a bit bored. The whole rave thing was going on, and nobody went to see bands. Everybody just saved all their money to buy drugs all week and did a weekender." At the time, the band had another guitarist soon join them, but he didn't share their love of David Bowie and Mott the Hoople, so they ended up dismissing him. In search of a guitarist, Cragg had a buddy back home in Leeds named Richard Steele, who he sent a demo of Spacehog's early songs to. Steele loved the demo and made a flight over to America. Steele at the time was playing in a band called Robinson, which he would describe as a British version of the Smashing Pumpkins. Apart from the Langdon brothers, the other members' influences included Queen, T-Rex, Mott the Hoople, David Bowie, Thin Lizzy, in addition to punk rock and the Beatles. All while this was going on, the members worked a variety of jobs, illegally might I add. Antony was working as a photographer's assistant, as well as a bike messenger, while Royston worked as an intern at a recording studio where he made about $5 an hour. It was at that studio he met Spacehog's future producer, Bryce Goggin. Steele, for his part, didn't have a job. In fact, he was in America for a very short period of time before they started to get attention. According to the Ottawa Citizen, the band hung out with the group The Voluptuous Horror of Karen Black, and some of Spacehog's early shows saw them play for drag queens. It wasn't long after this that word started to spread around New York City about the band's live shows in the East Village, and record labels, as you can imagine, started showing up to their concerts. The timing couldn't have been better because the band's members were running out of money. Cragg got fired from his job, the Langdon brothers' wages didn't make enough to survive, and Steele was unemployed. I do want to point out that everything happened very quickly, as Steele had only been in the country for a few weeks by this point in time. Spacehog were soon playing a showcase for 5 different record labels, and it was reported at the showcase that one of the executives at Columbia got into a fistfight with one of the other executives over signing the band. Funny enough, Spacehog didn't sign with Columbia. Instead, they opted to go with a company called Hi-Fi Recordings. It may surprise you to know, though, that Spacehog initially wrote Hi-Fi off as they'd never heard of them before, but the band's lawyer was insistent that they hear their pitch. So Hi-Fi called up Spacehog one day, telling the members that they were now affiliated with both Sire and Elektra Records, and that cemented the deal. With a record deal in hand, the band members were now resident aliens, which meant that despite not being citizens, they could work in America. They had acquired their green cards, and Resident Alien became the name of the group's debut record. The cover of the album features a nod to this, containing a fake immigration visa issued by a place called New Yorkshire, a nod to their roots in the UK and their home in America. As for the band's name, it would be given to them by a promoter in New York City. They originally planned on calling themselves Grass, but there already was a group named Supergrass. As for the alien and space themes, the band chalked it up to the fact that being musicians was very alien to a lot of the world, since most people couldn't relate to that type of career. In March of '95, Spacehog headed up to upstate New York to Bearsville Studio to record their debut album. The same studio had played home to the Rolling Stones, the band, as well as Bob Dylan. Royston took a couple of songs he had written in his previous band, The Zeros, and wrote a couple more with his new bandmates. These songs formed the basis of Resident Alien and include the tracks In the Meantime, Zeros, Candyman, The song that, of course, got on everyone's radar was the track In the Meantime. Royston found inspiration for the track when he was just 12 years old. He was playing in another band called Reeves. One of his bandmates named Paul had what he referred to as an educated record collection, and one of the records he had was from a group called Penguin Cafe Orchestra. On that album was a song called Telephone and Rubber Band. That song stuck in Royston's mind for a long time. The band ended up sampling the song, as you can see here. The sound sampled is a recording of when a phone line's wires get crossed. Royston remarked to Songfacts, on the actual phone it's somewhere between E flat and E, so there was some speeding up going on to make it in tune with E, and then we changed the chorus to A and it worked for the whole thing. As for what the song actually means, Royston added in the same interview, it's me trying to reach people. It's using some kind of metaphor of a worldly or inner worldly search for the end of isolation, and the acceptance of oneself is in there. At the end of the day, it's saying whatever you got to do, it's okay, it's all right. And I think that's also me talking to myself, getting through my own anxieties and fear of death. In the Meantime was issued as the first single from the album, and college radio, rock radio, and MTV's Buzzbin latched onto it and in the meantime would go on to top the mainstream rock tracks chart for 4 weeks. It also crossed over to the Hot 100 chart, peaking at number 32. Q104 in New York City was one of the first radio stations in the country to add the song, with the station's program director calling it the perfect pop song. The follow-up single, Cruel to Be Kind, was a modest hit, peaking at number 29 on the mainstream rock tracks chart. This resulted in the band's debut record going gold, selling 500,000 copies. In the meantime, became the third most played rock tune of 1996. The success of the song caught the members off guard, with Antony telling Spin, "Nobody knew that In the Meantime was going to be a hit. It seemed like we were the wrong fit at that time with the type of music we were making and the influences we had. There was something a bit retro about what we were doing, and it felt like the glam aspect was a bit in the past when everyone was walking around in plaid and looking really grungy." Billboard magazine interviewed the purchasing manager for the 143-store chain National Record Mart, who saw a huge bump in sales following the success of In the Meantime, and they believed that people were hungry for a new David Bowie album, and instead Resident Alien seemed to fill that void. Antony added that he thought the song connected with listeners because so much of what was popular on the radio showed roots no deeper than Pearl Jam. Another cliche the band had to deal with was Antony and Royston being brothers, especially at a time when Oasis and Black Crowes were hugely popular. In fact, all three bands ended up touring together years later. Antony remarked to the Hartford Courant, "What can I tell you? It's getting really dumb. It's a new trend, but there's nothing I can do about it, can I? I really like my brother. I really like his songs. It's natural we're in the same band, I suppose." Spacehog's sound was frequently labeled as glam, futuristic rock, space rock. I mean, space obviously was on their mind, as 3 songs have this kind of theme in their title, including Spacehog, Space is the Place, and Starside. The press most commonly compared Royston's vocals to that of David Bowie and Axl Rose, strangely enough, but the members referred to their music as futuristic rock with a down-home barnyard feel. Antony told the Winston-Salem Journal about the frequent glam comparison, saying, "If you listen to the whole album, you quickly realize that we aren't even remotely glam rock. The sound may be vaguely reminiscent of glam rock, but if anything, the single In the Meantime is a parody of glam that no one seems to have gotten. We have been called all sorts of things, none of which are accurate. We are not grunge." Steele would add in the same interview, "But I guess it's really pop rock. It's melodic, and overall the album is sort of eclectic." It probably didn't help that the members wore fake fur coats, shiny platform shoes, dresses, and candy-colored nail polish and dark glasses. I also want to point out that the New York Times wrote a piece in 1996 about how retro sunglasses were having a surge in popularity thanks to groups like Spacehog. The members of Spacehog were even interviewed for the piece, telling the paper they were influenced by the parody film This Is Spinal Tap, with Antony adding, "The basis of our band is to relive Spinal Tap. The sunglass thing developed from the fact that every rock and roll band worth anything wore sunglasses. Then it was just a matter of seeing how well we could outdo each other. But the important thing is that we usually get it completely wrong." Some critics blasted the band for being too open about their influences, but Spacehog shrugged off those frequent comparisons to David Bowie, with Royston claiming Bowie was influenced by John Lennon, while Antony told Rolling Stone, "We've grown up in a world that is saturated with music. It's all around you and influential. Bowie would never have recorded Resident Alien any day of the week. It's just not an accurate comparison." The band even had some fun with their critics, printing a negative review from Boston's Lollipop magazine on their own t-shirts. While Spacehog were experiencing success in America, other British acts were becoming popular as well. You're my But the band were adamant that they didn't consider themselves Britpop, chalking it up to a movement that had happened long after they left home. Despite the band's success in America, they weren't as successful back home. Some in the British press had actually grown to resent the group because they moved to America and made it big there first, and some didn't even consider them British. Some critics back home wrote them off as being too Americanized and being what Americans would consider British rock, with their foppish clothes and over-enunciated vocals. The Manchester Evening News dubbed Spacehog as the best British thing to come out of the States, adding, "Suffice to say, Spacehog are here to stay for at least a year or two." Royston told Magna magazine, "Back home in Britain, we were very much ostracized. We were signed in America and were living in New York. We were on another planet in some ways." Spacehog promoted Resident Alien by touring alongside Silverchair, Red Hot Chili Peppers, as well as Tripping Daisy. Despite selling 500,000 records and nabbing some high-profile touring spots, Spacehog ended up finishing their first major tour broke. Why were they broke, you might ask? Well, the band admitted to spending their money on stupid things, telling the Dispatch newspaper that when they were an opening act, the headliner would show up in a broken-down van, while the members of Spacehog would show up to gigs in a limo. In the meantime, later appeared in Guitar Hero 5 and Rock Band 3 as an on-disc track, and most famously appeared in the Guardians of the Galaxy 3 movie as well as the trailer. That does it for today's video, guys. Thanks for watching. We'll see you again in Rock Culture Stories. Take care.